Welcome to Creative Conversations, where I ask my guests, what does the word creativity mean to you? My name is Nina Lenton. I'm an untangler and coach, and I work with founders and freelancers who have lots of ideas, but aren't making progress on the ones that really matter to them. And I'm here today with Duncan Catterall. Hi, Duncan.
Hi, Nina.
Can you just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Duncan Catterall. I'm a filmmaker and animator based in the UK.
Okay, and I'm going to ask the question I ask all my guests. What does the word creativity mean to you?
Creativity is kind of the manifestation of ideas into the real world in some kind of tangible sense. I think creativity is a process and a journey. It's got to be something that is crafted, something that is created. So whilst you can imagine things, just purely imagining something is not creative on its own without then turning that into something.
Yeah. And how does that manifest itself in your work? Have you got an example of an idea that, you know, the kind of ideas that you turn into things?
Yeah, so I mean, for my own work, so for years and years and years, I've done a lot of music videos. I've worked for some pretty big brands. I've made films. I made my first film when I was 19. Generally speaking, you'll have an idea, or someone will approach you with a concept. Very often I'm approached by clients and they've got an idea of something already. It's very unusual. You have a blank slate, but then you've got to try and draw out that idea. And then that is where the kind of craft comes in to then whether you're going to go and film some actors or anything like that, or you're going to then create characters. You have to start building up the world around that idea. What else is going to be included? What are the parameters to this creation? So I guess if it's an animation, you're going to have to make everything that's on screen. So you've got to have a real sense of, I think early on you want to get a sense of the tone. So what is the feeling? What does this idea make me feel?
So there's a lot involved in, even when you see, I know I saw a short animation that you'd done a little while ago, which I think was a music video with an animated character in it. And even something like that, you know, there's a lot to it, isn't there?
Yeah. So you're going to be working on something for months. So, for example, that I think if it's the one I think you've seen, that's probably the matchstick animation that I put out before Christmas. With a project like that, you're storyboarding in advance. So storyboarding is where you draw all the different shots you have ideas for. And I'll generally cut those together on a timeline with the music, or if it's a different kind of film and you've got voice there or anything else. Even if you haven't got the main voiceover yet, you record a scratch voiceover and cut something together, because then you can figure out your timings and your pacing and things like that. So the story was kind of there from the client, from Ben. And then there were some gaps in there as he kind of journeyed into different areas and things like that. So I suggested, well, we should play with scale. We should play with the idea that this is a matchstick. With the matchstick, it was a matter of scale being a device for moving the story forwards and creating scenarios. And so, you know, the idea you could be run over by a drinks can that's rolling down the road, or the peril that is crossing a road itself, and a lot of different things that just wouldn't be an issue if you're a full-size person. But as a tiny little matchstick, all those things suddenly have a massive effect on the world that they're inside. So
it sounds like your kind of creativity is quite technical compared to perhaps some of the people that I've spoken to, with quite a lot involved in actually bringing something to life.
I think a lot of my work has been quite technical in terms of, so I used to be kind of more active on set. I'm steering more into my animation these days, especially with small kids at home and stuff like that. But I'm finding myself on set less often. I'm more on the animation side of things. I think when I'm doing stuff like 3D animation, there's a lot more kind of tech involved. But when I'm doing stuff like 2D, it's kind of goes there are techniques and there's methods, but essentially it's can you turn some drawings into into something that moves and that you can believe. I mean, I started out with stop motion, and essentially, you know, you take a frame, you move something, and if you do it in the correct way, it can feel like a real character moving and having emotions and stuff like that. There's incredible animators and artists that I know that can do these amazing 2D animations, and there's no change in technology there. It's paper and pencil. But the levels of skill and artistry and stuff to then create something that might be in your head is then that ability to kind of extract those ideas and actually make them real is the thing where experience really kind of comes in, and you can't replicate that. But I think alongside that, you're kind of accepting your own flaws and your own limitations. Sometimes there'll be certain things you can't necessarily do in the same way as other people, or you might just do something in a different way. You've got your own biases, you've got your own tastes, you've got things you like to do and things you don't like to do. And those will be the things that come across that make that particular piece of art yours, or that piece of animation or film or whatever it is that you're creating. That's the thing that makes it uniquely yours. It's understanding what is it that you're bringing to that kind of creative endeavor, and what is it that makes it yours, and how is it that allows you to express that thing?
So obviously some of the work you do is for clients, and some of the work that you do is your own creative projects. Where do you gather inspiration for the kind of things that you do? And does that differ depending on whether it's for your projects or something that a client comes with, maybe some of their own thoughts?
Yeah, I think inspiration will usually come from the client initially if it's something that's being briefed for. So usually you'd be asking a client to send over references. So if it's if they've got particular pieces of artwork that they like, or they've got films and things that are inspiring them. This can vary client to client. There was a musician I used to work with a lot once upon a time who would send me huge amounts of these like quite art house films and stuff like that, and there'd be all these amazing different kind of references to different things. And then at other times you can get quite a blank slate, which can actually be more challenging than trying to take on the different references that you get. I think I just generally kind of explore a lot of art and a lot of animation. I try and immerse myself in all of the work that a lot of my kind of peers are doing, trying to be encouraging as well with that.
And that actually then, so typically in the kinds of projects you do, you would be working with a range of other people on that same project who are all bringing different things to it.
Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, in terms of, would you have said that you're someone who has lots of ideas? And if so, are they ideas around a specific project, for example, or might they be wider than that?
I think this is the struggle really as a creative person, is you'll often have more ideas than you can ever possibly make. And I think I think I've got more ideas than I can reasonably make in a lifetime. There's stuff that I've kind of had on the back burner sometimes for years, and it's not that I can't. There's a lot of things that kind of come in the way of doing your own creative projects. So I've been lucky to do creative work for a living for most of my adult life, but it's actually quite rare to work on your own creative projects. That's one of the reasons I've steered back towards animation, because it's starting to be the case that I can do a few more things myself. I think life kind of gets in the way of a lot of creation of ideas. Being a parent, especially with young children at home and stuff, that's made it quite hard, especially in the kind of baby days, to get some time in. You know, by the time you sat in a dark room until, you know, that time, you're then quite tired and getting on with other creative projects that might not be work
Yeah.
is really difficult. I'm starting to try and do a few little bits, but I'm trying to do them bite-size kind of sections.
What does bite size mean for you? Because I mean, I've spoken to a few of guests on previous series about this actually. Are there little in your world? Are there little tasks that you can do that are creative?
Yes, there's small, 10-second animations, and it might take me a couple of evenings or a whole week of evenings to do a clip of that. I've got something I'm working on at the moment. There's these kind of crazy little monsters that, I can sit on an iPad and draw that stuff, and I'm not having to kind of sit behind my desk and do that kind of work.
So in the kind of work you do, then you do need to be very prepared and have figured out what you're doing before you actually come to make it.
Yeah, I think that's why you've got to have a strong imagination for direction, whether that's being a director or being an art director or anything else like that. You've got to be able to not only have a strong sense in your mind as to what that thing looks like, but to maintain that idea in your mind until completion.
So one of the things that I've talked to other guests about is about their process, and in particular the kind of like the space. You know how ideas kind of percolate. I don't want to put words into your mouth because I want to try and get you to explain what's the role of sort of space and stepping back from things in your development of an animation or a visual production.
Stepping back from not sure there's often time to step back from ideas too much. If you're on a professional production, it's usually all systems go. If an idea's been signed off, then you are just making the thing. There's always kind of an engagement stage where you're kind of talking through ideas with people, and I think where you kind of need to step back is when there's some initial ideas. It's sometimes worth stepping back from those ideas for a little bit, maybe overnight or for a day or so, and just when you come back to those ideas before you send it, because I usually do like a reply treatment back to a client. So someone's come to me with some ideas, I've kind of processed them in my own way, and then I will sort of work by a kind of reply treatment. So I'll kind of come back to them and say, look, this is how I think I would frame these ideas. And it's worth having a few hours, days, if you can, to reflect on those ideas or just to kind of have the space from them so you can then come back to it. And actually, I think you do need to have the kind of boldness and fearlessness to kind of say, actually, this is the thing that we're going to be doing, and to actually make a decision. And I think that's the thing with producing and directing, that you need to have the clarity of thought to go, no, this is the thing that I think works for what we're trying to say, and this is the concept that works, because you can do any number of different variations under the sun for everything. You've got to have faith in your own ideas. At some point, you've got to be able to commit to making an idea. Otherwise, you'll always be sat there with lots and lots of ideas and not necessarily actually be able to follow through on those, because you're kind of procrastinating by making those iterations.
Yeah, by developing those ones rather than actually picking one and just running with it.
Yeah. At some point, you have to decide.
So you've talked a lot about the obviously you're very fortunate to be able to do something creative in your work, and it's obviously something that takes quite a lot of intense concentration and preparation and planning. Outside of that, do you do anything that you would consider creative, or is your work? I mean, I'm not saying you have to. Or is your work your creativity, or do you do other things outside that?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I think I've kind of essentially made my hobby a career, which is, I guess sometimes that's sometimes that's an absolute privilege and sometimes it's a bit of a curse, especially if you want to just go and watch a film or something like that. It's probably quite annoying. I think there's a separation between work projects and creative projects, and actually the reality of commercial and digital animation, motion design, filmmaking. You're using creativity as a communication tool, and you're hopefully getting a message across. And, sometimes I've been very, very lucky to work on things that have been deeply meaningful and very, very important. And other times I have made things like a radiator brush commercial, but, you're not going to do something that is necessarily creatively satisfying every single time. And it's, you are paying your bills, which is important too. But I think the point of doing it for a living and not just doing the creative thing on the side is it's at some point you need to be able to take those creative skills that you've been honing and using with client work and get that over into a more creative project. And it is one of the reasons I've kind of done so many music videos and things like that, because while they're not necessarily the biggest budgets, they usually do allow you to genuinely express and be creative.
Excellent. So, before we finish, are there any links that you want to share where people can find examples of your work or anything else that you'd like to share?
Sure. Yeah. So the easiest way to find me, my portfolio, and some of my work, it's a super easy URL, which is dcfilm.com. I am on Instagram as Duncan Catterall Film. But yeah, all my social links are at the bottom of dcfilm.com, and you can see my portfolio and other things I worked on there.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
It's been great having you on to talk about something a little bit different.
Oh, thank you. Well, great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Creative Conversations. I'm Nina Lenton. I'm an untangler and coach, and you can find out more about my work and this podcast at ninalenton.co.uk.